What's up, Leafs fans, and welcome back to Leafs Digest. Big story breaks last night out of Leafs camp from Eliot Freidman of Sportsnet. Eliot Freidman reporting that at the end of last season, the 2020-2021 season, Leafs forward Ilya Mikheyev has asked for a trade. This is what sources have told Sportsnet's Eliot Freidman. This is coming out of, obviously, I'm going to say it's not coming out of the Leafs camp. I don't think the Leafs camp would be willing to let this information go out to the public. I don't think this is the kind of thing they'd want out there. This is something we've talked about before as Toronto sports teams. They love what we're going to call the cone of silence. They keep everything in-house. They keep it to themselves. This has to be coming from Ilya Mikheyev's camp being leaked to Eliot Freidman. I don't know if it's that much of a story because he's obviously still with the team. No trade was made, but Josh, what do you make of this request from Ilya Mikheyev? Is it a bigger deal than it needs to be? Do we need to just forget about it? How do we handle this news?
I don't love it at all. I'm not looking into it as a deal breaker with Mikheyev, but for a team that wants Mikheyev to get it turned around, start converting on its opportunities more, start contending for a championship, it's terrible news because we need everybody in the same boat. The talent's there, it's been there, but the issue is guys aren't buying in. Mikheyev, he's one of the few Russians we have on the roster, which I know Russians, they're sometimes a little bit picky about where they like to play, especially when the KHL is second best league out there. So there's always that fallback to them. They can go home and have a really good league. But for me, this is projection. He had a ton of opportunities. I don't know where else he's going to be able to play on a second line with John Tavares and have that opportunity in the first place. Kind of ridiculous that he's looking at the Leafs like, trade me. I know there was an injury involved there. From the sounds of it, the Leafs did not mishandle his wrist injury. He got back when he got back. He wasn't converting. He had some issues with that stuff, but that falls on him. He had a golden opportunity playing on our second line with really good talent. So to then go and look at the Leafs like, trade me, that's a pretty privileged take. That's like I can go back to the KHL if I want. It's pretty arrogant, and we don't need that kind of attitude on a team that wants to win.
It's interesting that you bring it up that way because I hadn't really considered it from that aspect yet. I honestly, not until right now, had I really thought about the factor of buying in, because never did I necessarily question he's not buying in. And I don't know if I perceive it as he doesn't want to win and he doesn't want to do that necessarily, or maybe I don't know if he doesn't want to buy into the system, but once you actually said it, I kind of started to think about it. Maybe it's that this is a guy who doesn't want to buy into the role that he's been given here in Toronto. I think maybe that's more of the way to look at it, because I think that part of the problem here is that he perceives himself as a player who should play higher up in the lineup or should have more opportunity with minutes or power play time or whatever he believes he deserves more of. I think that maybe he thinks that he wasn't getting that in Toronto, and we've seen that with different guys come here, especially Russian players. There was a defenseman a couple years ago, I can't remember the name off the top of my head who it was, who didn't necessarily pan out, and then last year we saw Mikko Lehtinen, who came here. He was supposed to be this incredible stud defenseman from Russia, led the KHL in points. Oh my God, he was going to be our Lord and Savior on defense. And then he couldn't even get in the lineup. And when he did get in the lineup, he didn't get the minutes because he wasn't trusted. And he didn't want to be here anymore. He thought he could get more ice time somewhere else. We move him to Columbus. So I was kind of thinking that would maybe where it was, but the more I start to think about it, the more I actually talk myself into it. I do kind of understand and believe what you're saying in terms of this is a guy who maybe he just didn't want to buy into his role. And I think that is a different way to look at it in terms of buying in, because maybe he does want to win. Maybe he wants to be here in Toronto. Maybe he does love this team and he wants to be a part of this and he thinks this team can win. But maybe he thinks that he deserves better or he deserves more, and he wasn't willing to play his role that they wanted him to play, which really, truly does come back to your comment of him not buying in, him not being ready to be a part of this system, which may go back to some of the problems that this guy's had with this team in last season, at least, because he's only been here for 2 years, and the first year he did play pretty well.
Yeah, and to be real, I don't really understand, though, why he feels like in the KHL, I think he had 23 goals, 22 assists, 45 points in like 62 games. He's right. A points guy. You want to get points? Play in Toronto where they're giving you a chance to play high up. And the only reason he drifted down was his own issue. We talked so many times on this podcast about him being snake bitten.
Mm.
That's not the fault of the organization.
No.
Convert on your opportunities. And I know he had a wrist injury.
Yeah, you need to play your way
Maybe.
into the ice time.
Well, exactly. And you're going to be able to play off of guys like John Tavares, William Nylander, new guys coming in like Kasha this year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Kasha might even boot him down. So I get maybe they're looking at this offseason and thinking, okay, Kasha and Richie, those are guys potentially playing in the top 6. Maybe not so much Kasha if Kasha turns out the way we want him to, probably.
Mm-hmm.
But the issue here is, I think, accountability on the part of Ilya Mikheyev, because he knows, I think he takes it for granted. He can go back to the KHL, get paid, be around the culture he loves. Toronto doesn't have
we
Russian
saw
players.
with Kirill Kaprizov from Minnesota.
Exactly. That,
yes.
So much entitlement. And I'm not trying to make a passing judgment on Russian hockey players. I'm just saying the reality is they have an amazing fallback where they're going to be paid well. They're going to get to go into an environment surrounded by family, the culture that they know.
Yeah.
It's just, I think they use it as a little bit of leverage. At least Kaprizov was. So I think Ilya Mikheyev, he's fed up, but it's projection. He's fed up with himself. And I think that he needs to turn it around and realize that the only way he gets what he wants out of this situation is by becoming the player that he was when we first brought him in. Because towards, I guess, I don't know, throughout basically all of last season, he was having a lot of trouble converting on grade A opportunities.
Yeah.
So I think
breakaway
it's an
after breakaway
thing
after
sure.
breakaway. It was the Grabner situation all over.
I know. And you get a lot of these opportunities because he's playing around great players.
Mm-hmm.
Like the forward depth on Toronto, at least in the top of the lineup, it's superb. You have a bunch of first liners playing. Yeah. So I don't know why he would trade that scenario just to go somewhere else. He's not going to get that crazy of a payday. And especially if he's not playing with other good players. Yeah. It's an accountability thing, projection. It's my take on it.
This is definitely one where I side with the team over the player in this situation, because if he was scoring a lot of points, I'd be like, yeah, well, why is he on the third line? Like, give him more minutes. But he wasn't. He couldn't score. That's why we saw him in his first season here get a lot of points playing on that second line. He started with the second line and then couldn't convert, gets moved down, and ultimately ends up being a third line guy for basically the rest of the season. And that was his role. He was a third line guy here, basically penalty kill, get breakaways. He created chances, but he didn't. They didn't turn into much because he couldn't capitalize, and it wasn't necessarily like he was turning those chances into goals for other people when he did get those chances.
Yeah, and that's not management's fault. That's his own issue. But I get that. I think being Russian and playing in Toronto wouldn't be, I mean, Toronto's a nice destination for guys to play despite all the media stuff. But I think Russians do prefer to go places like Montreal, where there's that European culture sort of, or even in the KHL. There's a whole bunch of different areas, but we don't have a Russian roster.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that guys who come over and play here really look for. And if you were to see him in another free agency, you'd probably go to somewhere with a lot of Russian presence. But it's not about the points. That's on him.
Yeah. And I think that like him from the player's side, because I think there's 2 points to this that we're going to talk about here. From the player's side, I don't think either of us are looking at this like, oh, wow, this is a big deal, because I think that it's one of those situations where you got to put up points to be able to get out onto the ice. Like you have to produce to be able to get that time. So I don't look at this as any big problem in terms of the Leafs culture, the Leafs coaching, mismanagement, nothing. I think it's strictly the player. He just wasn't happy with not getting to play higher up than the third line, but you got to score points to do that. Now, the flip side of this is the team. So I thought about it once I saw the news, and I kind of thought about like, oh, this doesn't really mean anything. But I personally have a take on it that I think it has some importance to the start of the season. It has some relevance to our projections for the lineups. So the Leafs, the club made it clear they do not want to accommodate the request and have told Mikheyev they consider him a part of the team moving forward. That's per Eliot Freidman. This is something that he reported on. I personally, Josh, my take on this right away is that this means he's going to be in the top 6 to start. I don't know if it means he's going to be in the top 6 opening night, but I think they're going to give him that opportunity come training camp and then preseason, because for them to say that they think he's a part of this team moving forward, he's going to be a key part. And if Freedman is taking that directly from the agent, the team, whoever it is that he got that information from, Eliot Freidman is a very credible source. It clearly means that this team has plans for him, and he's obviously not happy playing in the bottom 6. And I think that if they weren't going to move on from him and Mikheyev wasn't going to do some kind of holdout or whatever he was going to do, or his agent was going to force it, I think this means he's going to start in the top 6, at least in training camp and then preseason?
I wouldn't read that deeply into it for a few reasons. One, because he hasn't earned that opportunity and we didn't do well last year in the playoffs. So to think we're going to go and give him that opportunity right out of the gate, I'm skeptical. I know he's had that opportunity before and did well with it, but after all
Yeah.
these comments, after that stretch he went through of not being productive, I don't see that as being a reward we just hand to him. I think he'll need to earn it, and I think he could. But the bigger thing here is when a player requests a trade or rumors like that pop up, the worst thing a team can do is then say we're humoring it, because that gives you no leverage to move him for assets whatsoever. So I think that of course they're just going to have this programmed response to it because they don't want to let teams know that they're humoring this, they're considering it, because then all of a sudden you're getting lowballed. They're treating it like there's no leverage and there's 1 year left on the contract, right?
Right.
So it's already going to be tough to get some lasting value back for him, and he's a
Yeah.
good player. So I feel like the Leafs are just saying this right now, so they can please him and make him feel important, get him reintegrated into the culture that he's seemingly buying out of. And then two, so that the trade offers, if it does go down that route, don't dry up. But that's my take on it. Maybe they do have bigger plans for him, but I just don't think he's earned it, and I think the Leafs don't think so either.
No, I think that's valid, actually. Because like I hadn't really considered the fact that if this news came public when he requested the trade, the value for him would have been depleted, and they potentially may not have been able to get back as much on the market as they'd like, or they could get had it not been known that he wanted out. If it was the Leafs shopping him, I'm sure that they could have gotten more than it is than Mikheyev wants out. So now the Leafs are being forced this hand of, okay, now we have to get rid of this guy. Who's going to come and pick up the scraps, and what scraps are we going to be able to pick up in order to move on from this guy? So I think that's valid. I think that's actually a really good point, good way to look at it. I think from my perspective, it was more of just like, if this team says they see him as a key part and they were going to deny that request, then and especially because they gave him that opportunity of playing on the second line in his first season and they saw production out of him, I think that they see that potential of him being a key part or a higher level player than what he displayed last year. So I think that they're going to be willing to give him that opportunity again. And I think it's less so from my perspective of, rewarding a guy for this, and more so because that left side has a lot of uncertainty. That left side had a lot of turnover. We have the new guys coming in through there. As you mentioned, like Bunting, Ritchie, Mikheyev. Let's just stick with those three. Like Ritchie, to me, I think is going to be a guy who's going to get the opportunity on the first line. But then are you just going to hand that second line opportunity or even move him up to the first line to Michael Bunting? I think it's worth the shot. I think you want to see what he can do, especially considering how highly touted he was as a free agent. But I think for me, it was just more the comfortability and the familiarity from the Leafs management towards Ilya Mikheyev of wanting to be like, okay, we'll give you that shot first.
Yeah, that's valid. I think that from looking at it from that standpoint, we are a little bit pressed positionally on that side. So to let it go to the guy who's done okay with it, in some past form, that might be the go-to move for them. But I think that they're going to be very flexible. They're going to let competition play out.
Agreed.
Bunting will probably get his ability or his opportunities to go and play on that second line early on
I
as well.
completely agree. Yeah.
And I'm kind of rooting for Bunting here. I think he's not only statistic. I know he's got such a small sample size and he's been amazing in the small sample size, but Mikheyev, these comments, I don't know where they came from. I honestly don't know. If he said that they mishandled the injury, I could understand that. But just out of the blue, when you've been handed a situation of a team that wants to win now, they value you. They give you opportunities to play with skilled players. They paid you your money to get you out of the KHL, all of that stuff. And you're going to go and let a rumor like this leak out after a really bad season for you personally.
Yes.
I just think it was the biggest sucker move. And I know he's 26 years old, so maybe some maturing that he needs to do. But I'm rooting for Bunting at this point. I hope he gets it. Statistically, he should get it if he stays on this trajectory. But yeah, obviously he's going to even out a little bit once he starts playing routine games in the NHL. I just don't think it's going to be handed to Mikheyev. Maybe it will be just sort of a default for the first little bit, but ultimately, I think he could be in trouble with this team. Let's see what happens. I hope it doesn't go that route because he has upside we've seen before, but just the attitude side of it bothers me so much.
Yeah, honestly. I hate when guys want out. Like it's such a crappy feeling, regardless of even like when Mikko Lehtinen wanted to move on. It was like, you didn't really perform here, but still it's that feeling of like when he wanted out, it's like, kind of sucks still because, you know, like even from like just a fan standpoint, you kind of want to see the guy have that opportunity to have success here in Toronto. And it's always that in the back of your mind, especially with these Russian guys who come over later in their careers, is like, could this guy just pan out? Could he just end up going somewhere else and being sick? Like you don't. What if Mikko Lehtinen goes out there and is a top two defenseman, like a top pairing defenseman next season? It's possible. I don't think it's likely, but it's possible. And you just hate seeing really that good opportunity happen. Yeah, he has the underlyings of being a player who's could be very, very good and could translate to the NHL. He just clearly didn't have that experience yet. He wasn't ready. He wasn't trusted here in Toronto yet. So it kind of sucks to see that happen. But Leafs fans, let us know what you think of Ilya Mikheyev requesting a trade. Does it mean anything to you? Are you mad at him as a player, as a person? Do you think that the management mishandled this situation? Do you think that they did the right thing? Should we trade him? And then the other aspect of that is, what do you think we could get back for a guy like Ilya Mikheyev? 1 year left on his deal, little money. He didn't really perform well last year. He's only been in the NHL for 2 years. Is there much value we could get back for a guy like this? Is it worth just keeping him around, potentially letting him walk as a free agent if he's still not happy at the end of the season? Let us know in the comments. Make sure you come back, like, comment, subscribe to this channel, tell your friends about this channel. Pushing to 1,000 subscribers here, so make sure you hit that subscribe button. And Leafs fans, look forward to hearing from you guys in the comments. Let us know what you think, but we'll see you guys soon. Keep believing.
Signing off.